Welcome to Life Stories, where we share the most inspiring tales of growth, redemption, and transformation. Today, we bring you the story of Jay Carter, a renowned artist and entrepreneur who dared to turn his vision of respect and inclusivity into reality. When Jay's dream of owning a high-end restaurant was tarnished by indifference and poor service, he took matters into his own hands, transforming not just a business but the lives of those who worked there. Join us as we uncover this powerful journey of change and second chances. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to start today's inspiring tale. Jay Carter sat alone in his studio, the dim glow of recording equipment casting long shadows across the room. His fingers rhythmically rolled a cigar between them. Though he hadn't lit it, the stillness around him felt unfamiliar, an odd contrast to his usual whirlwind of concerts, meetings, and photo shoots. Tonight, the world outside faded, leaving only the thoughts tumbling in his mind. 4 months now, an idea had taken root deep within him, growing quietly but persistently. It wasn't about music, fame, or even money. No, this was something personal. Something that struck at the very core of what mattered to him. He wanted to create a space where everyone, no matter who they were, could walk through the doors and feel like they belonged. The idea had first struck him during a casual dinner with a close friend, Leah. She had raved about a popular fine dining restaurant that had recently come up for sale. The place was the epitome of sophistication, gleaming cutlery, flawless service, and dishes that looked like art. But for all its polish, Leah mentioned there were whispers of staff treating certain patrons differently. Jay had nodded along politely at the time, but her words lingered. Respect. That's what the world seemed to be lacking. As a man who had climbed from the streets of Oakland to the pinnacle of success, Jay knew all too well what it felt like to be dismissed, judged, or overlooked. And now, he had the means to change that for at least one corner of the world. The next day, Jay began making calls. He didn't want his name attached to the purchase. Not yet. He instructed his lawyers and business manager to keep the deal discreet. This wasn't about flashing his wealth or attaching his celebrity to another venture. It was about building something meaningful, a haven that reflected his values. When the deal finally closed, Jay celebrated quietly, a small toast at home with Leah, his mother, and a few close friends was all he needed. But the next morning, as he stared at the ownership documents on his desk, a realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Owning a restaurant wasn't just about paperwork or profits. It was about atmosphere, culture, and the people who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. It was about ensuring that the values he cherished were not only written on a mission statement but felt by every guest who walked through those doors. Jay decided he wouldn't rely solely on reports or managers to shape the restaurant's culture. He needed to see it for himself, to feel the place as any other diner would. And so, the plan formed in his mind: a secret visit. Completely under the radar. The evening of his visit, Jay chose his simplest outfit, a plain hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He even borrowed an old, nondescript sedan from a friend to avoid drawing attention. This wasn't about being Jay Carter, the music mogul. Tonight, he was just a man looking for a good meal and a welcoming atmosphere. As he parked outside the restaurant, a wave of nerves swept over him, a strange sensation for someone used to commanding stages. The building glowed warmly in the crisp evening air, its soft lighting spilling onto the sidewalk. To any passerby, it looked like a sanctuary of elegance and comfort. But Jay knew appearances could be deceiving. He took a deep breath, adjusted his cap, and stepped inside. The interior was every bit as sophisticated as Leah had described: soft clinks of glasses, the hum of quiet conversations, and the tantalizing aroma of freshly prepared dishes wafting from the kitchen. Jay's gaze swept over the room, taking in the details: the polished wood floors, the subtle yet luxurious decor, and the well-dressed patrons seated at their tables. When he approached the hostess stand, a young woman glanced up from her clipboard, Her expression was polite but distant, her gaze flicking over his casual attire for a brief moment before returning to the seating chart. "Good evening," she said, her tone professional but devoid of warmth. "Do you have a reservation?" Jay shook his head. "Nah, just me tonight. Got room for one?" The hostess hesitated, her eyes darting back to the seating chart. "Let me check," she said, disappearing into the dining area. When she returned, her expression carried the faintest trace of discomfort. "We have a table near the entrance. Follow me." Jay nodded and followed her, noting the subtle glances from other diners as he passed. He was used to the curiosity that came with being recognized. But this felt different, more judgmental, almost dismissive. The table she led him to was small, tucked near the entrance where a cold draft blew in every time someone opened the door. It wasn't subtle placement, it felt deliberate. Jay sat down and opened the menu. But his focus wasn't on the food. He wanted to watch, to understand the rhythm of the place and the interactions between staff and guests. It didn't take long for cracks to appear in the restaurant's polished exterior. Minutes passed without anyone approaching his table. Around him, servers buzzed efficiently, delivering drinks and appetizers with smiles and lively chatter. But Jay, he was invisible. Finally, a waitress appeared, her name tag read Lisa. Her demeanor was curt, her tone clipped as she took his order. "What can I get you?" she asked, barely meeting his eyes. Jay smiled politely. "I'll take the house special and a glass of water." Lisa scribbled on her notepad without acknowledgement. "Sure," she muttered, turning away. As the evening wore on, Jay's observations painted a stark picture. Staff members who were warm and engaging with other patrons became cold and indifferent when interacting with him. Conversations filled with laughter and energy at neighboring tables turned into curt exchanges when directed his way. When his meal finally arrived, the presentation was sloppy, the flavors bland, an insult to the fine dining reputation the restaurant claimed to uphold. Jay's appetite evaporated, replaced by a slow-burning anger. It wasn't just the bad food or the indifferent service. It was the principle of it all. He had poured his heart into this dream, believing he could create a space where respect wasn't optional but foundational. And yet, here he was, sitting in his own restaurant, being treated like he didn't belong. As he paid the bill, leaving a generous tip. Not for the service, but for his own sense of dignity, Jay made a silent vow. This wasn't the end. As he stepped outside and leaned against his car, the restaurant's glowing sign mocked him. It represented everything he wanted this place to be: warmth, elegance, respect. But tonight, it felt hollow. Pulling out his phone, Jay hit record. "You'll know me," he began, his voice calm but laced with disappointment. "But tonight, they didn't. And what I saw in my own restaurant, that's gonna change. Stay tuned." Jay drove away into the night, his mind racing. The first step of his plan was complete. The next would shake the very foundations of the restaurant and its staff. The following week was a whirlwind for Jay. His phone buzzed with messages from friends and family curious about how his restaurant visit had gone. But Jay kept his thoughts to himself, letting the disappointment simmer quietly beneath the surface. He wasn't ready to reveal the truth, not yet. Instead, he spent his evenings replaying the events in his mind. Every dismissive glance, every cold interaction, every second of being ignored in a place that was supposed to embody his values cut deeper than he wanted to admit. What bothered him most wasn't the personal slight, it was the thought of others experiencing the same treatment. What about the single mother saving for a special night out? The couple celebrating their anniversary? The teenager taking their first steps into fine dining? If they walked into his restaurant and received the same cold treatment, what would it say about the place he had built? He couldn't let that happen. The next step in his plan required patience and precision. Jay decided to return to the restaurant. This time as himself, not as Jay Carter, the mogul, but as the owner. The visit would be unannounced. He wanted to witness how the staff handled their day-to-day operations without the looming specter of their boss hanging over them. The evening came quickly, and Jay found himself once again parked outside the restaurant. This time, he wore a fitted suit. Understated but sharp. The glow of the restaurant lights spilled onto the sidewalk, just as it had the first time. But tonight, they seemed brighter, more focused, as though the building itself was challenging him to step inside and take control. Jay pushed open the door, and the atmosphere struck him immediately. The same elegance and sophistication greeted him. But now he noticed something else beneath the surface, a tension that hadn't been as obvious during his undercover visit. The hostess at the podium was a different woman this time. She was older, with a polished demeanor that spoke of years in the service industry. But even she hesitated when her eyes landed on Jay, scanning him quickly before putting on a professional smile. "Good evening," she said warmly. "Do you have a reservation?" Jay nodded. "Not tonight. Just stopping by to see how everything's going." Her expression flickered for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. Please follow me." This time, the table wasn't near the door. It was in the heart of the dining room, surrounded by the hum of quiet conversations and the clinking of glasses. Jay sat down, his eyes scanning the room. The staff seemed busy, but not rushed. Customers were enjoying their meals, oblivious to the man quietly observing them from his seat. A waitress approached his table, a familiar figure. It was Lisa. Jay's heart tightened slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. Her demeanor was no different than before, brisk, cold, and detached. "What can I get you?" she asked. Her tone clipped. Jay smiled politely. "I'll start with water. I'd like to hear about the specials when you have a moment." Lisa gave a curt nod, scribbling on her notepad before walking away without another word. Jay watched her retreating figure, noting how quickly her attitude shifted when she stopped at another table. Her voice suddenly warm and engaging as she took their order. Minutes passed. Then more. Jay's water finally arrived, placed on the table with a casual thud. He nodded his thanks, though Lisa didn't wait long enough to hear it. By the time his food arrived, Jay's patience was thin. The dish was beautifully plated, but the taste was just as underwhelming as his first visit. Bland, uninspired, a hollow reflection of the restaurant's reputation. Jay didn't finish the meal. Instead, he signaled for the check and quietly observed the staff one last time. The hostess was still at her podium, smiling politely as she greeted new arrivals. The servers bustled around, laughing and chatting with certain customers while barely acknowledging others. It was clear now. This wasn't a one-time fluke. The culture of his restaurant was fundamentally broken, and it ran deeper than a single bad night. Outside, the cool evening air greeted him as he leaned against his car. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, disappointment, and a fierce determination to set things right. The sign above the restaurant glowed brightly, a stark reminder of the ideals it was supposed to represent. Jay pulled out his phone, staring at the screen for a long moment before hitting record. "What's up, y'all?" he began, his voice steady but sharp. "Tonight, I came back to my restaurant to see if things had changed, to see if my first visit was just a bad night. Turns out, it wasn't. The same coldness, the same lack of respect, it's all still there." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But here's the thing," he continued. "This isn't just about me. It's about anyone who's ever walked into this place and felt like they didn't belong. That's not what I built this for. That's not what I stand for." Jay's eyes burned with conviction as he looked into the camera. "Stay tuned," he said, his voice low but firm. "Because things are about to change. Big time." He posted the video before sliding into his car and driving off. The night was quiet, but Jay's mind wasn't. He knew the storm his words would unleash. He also knew it was the only way to fix what had gone so deeply wrong. As his phone began to buzz with notifications, Jay smiled grimly. The time for silence was over. It was time to make his voice heard. The morning after Jay's video went live, the world erupted. His phone buzzed incessantly, lighting up with notifications faster than he could swipe them away. Messages flooded in from friends, fans, and industry colleagues, all sharing their shock and support. Social media was ablaze with reposts, hashtags, and heated discussions. #RespectJ, #boycott the spot, and #fixitnow trended across multiple platforms within hours. Comments poured in under his video, ranging from words of encouragement to outright fury at the staff's behavior. Celebrities chimed in, with artists like Kendrick Duval and Simone Ray sharing Jay's post with captions like "unacceptable" and "time for a change." But the ripple effects didn't stop there. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately, and by mid-morning, it was splashed across headlines. Jay Carter exposes disrespect at his own restaurant. Jay calls out his staff for unacceptable behavior, and the rapper-turned-restaurateur demands change. Jay sat in his kitchen, sipping coffee as he scrolled through the endless wave of reactions. While he had expected some attention, the sheer magnitude of the public's response was overwhelming. The internet was ruthless, dissecting every detail of his experience. Review sites for the restaurant were flooded with comments, many from people who had never even set foot inside but felt compelled to weigh in. One comment caught his eye: "If they're treating Jay Carter like this, imagine how they treat people who don't have his status. Shameful." Jay's stomach twisted as he read it. That was the heart of the matter. It wasn't just about him, it was about what his restaurant represented and how far it had strayed from his vision. By early afternoon, the fallout had reached the restaurant staff. Jessica, the young woman who had dismissed Jay with indifference, was among the first to feel the heat. Her name had been identified in online discussions, and her social media accounts were bombarded with angry messages. "Apologize to Jay. This is how you treat people. Hope you enjoy looking for a new job." Jessica sat at the server station, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her face was pale as she scrolled through the messages, each one hitting harder than the last. Carlos, one of her co-workers, leaned against the wall, shaking his head. "This is bad," he muttered, glancing out the window where reporters had begun gathering. "Real bad." Jessica looked up at him, her eyes wide with panic. "Do you think he's serious about coming back?" Carlos shrugged, his expression grim. "He said it. Didn't he? You saw the video. He's not the type to bluff." Meanwhile, in the manager's office, Mark, the restaurant's overseer, was fielding frantic calls from corporate. The regional director, Ryan Brooks, had already made it clear that he was on his way to handle the situation personally. "You don't have to come down here," Mark pleaded into the phone, sweat beading on his forehead. "I've got it under control." "No, you don't." Ryan's voice cut sharply through the line. "I've seen the footage. I've read the reviews. I'll be there in an hour." Mark slumped back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He could feel the walls closing in. By the time Ryan arrived, the atmosphere in the restaurant was tense, like a storm about to break. The staff stood awkwardly in the dining room, their usual chatter replaced by uneasy silence. When Ryan walked in, flanked by 2 corporate security guards, his presence commanded immediate attention. He wasted no time. "Mark," he said, his voice cold and clipped. "Step forward." Mark swallowed hard and did as he was told, his shoulders hunched. "I've reviewed the security footage," Ryan continued, holding up a tablet, "and I've seen enough. You were present during every instance of disrespect toward Mr. Carter, and you did nothing to stop it. In fact, you participated." "Sir, save it," Ryan interrupted, his tone final. "You're done. Turn in your keys and leave." The dining room was deathly quiet as Mark handed over his keyring with trembling hands. He looked around at his staff, but no one met his gaze. Without another word, he walked out the door, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. Ryan turned back to the remaining staff, his expression severe. "The rest of you, listen carefully. From this moment forward, this restaurant is under new rules. If you can't follow them, you're free to leave now. No warnings. No second chances." One by one, a few employees removed their aprons and left, their faces pale. For those who stayed, Ryan's next words were chilling. "Mandatory training starts tomorrow. Respect. Professionalism. Customer service. You miss a single session, and you're out. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir," they answered in unison, their voices shaky. As Ryan left the restaurant, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jay. "Thanks for handling it. I'll be there tomorrow to see the progress." Ryan's jaw tightened. There was still a long way to go. But Jay's message carried a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about cleaning up a restaurant, it was about restoring its soul. The stage was set for Jay's return, and the entire staff knew they were on borrowed time. Every move they made now mattered. The public's eyes were on them, and Jay Carter's presence loomed like a shadow over their every action. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning they all feared and the change they so desperately needed. The following day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the restaurant. The staff arrived early, their movements slow and deliberate as though walking on eggshells. The weight of Jay Carter's promised return hung over them, an unspoken tension evident in every glance and hesitant word. Jessica, the once confident waitress who had treated Jay dismissively, stood behind the server station, her hands trembling as she stacked menus. Her usual sharp demeanor was replaced by a quiet, almost fearful energy. Carlos wiped down tables that didn't need cleaning, his jaw clenched, and his eyes darting toward the entrance every few seconds. Tyler, one of the cooks, leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching the staff fumble. "This ain't gonna be pretty," Tyler muttered under his breath, his voice carrying a resigned tone. Jessica shot him a glare, though her heart wasn't in it. "You think I don't know that?" she snapped. "Just saying," Tyler replied, shrugging. "Best keep your head down." By mid-morning, the reporters were back, their cameras and microphones lined up outside the restaurant. News vans idled on the street, and pedestrians gathered to see if the man of the hour would show. Inside, the staff tried to focus on their tasks, but the constant hum of activity outside served as a relentless reminder of what was coming. When the door finally swung open, every head in the room turned in unison. Jay Carter stepped inside, dressed sharply in a tailored black suit that exuded quiet authority. There was no hoodie, no disguise this time. His gold chain glinted subtly in the light, and his eyes, sharp and focused, swept the room with an intensity that made even the most confident staff member shrink. "Good morning," Jay said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that demanded attention. "Good morning, sir," the staff replied, almost in unison, their voices a mix of respect and anxiety. Jay's gaze moved slowly from one face to the next, lingering on Jessica for just a moment longer than the others. She felt her heart drop, her palms clammy as she fumbled with the menus in her hands. Ryan Brooks appeared from the back office, his stride brisk and composed. "Mr. Carter," he greeted, extending a hand. Jay shook it firmly but didn't break his gaze from the staff. "Ryan," he said, "what's the update?" Ryan nodded. "We've implemented the first steps of the new policies. Training starts today. Mandatory for everyone. We've had a few resignations, but the remaining staff have committed to meeting your standards." Jay raised an eyebrow. "Let's see how committed they are." He turned back to the dining room, addressing the staff directly. "You'll know why I'm here. I don't think I need to remind anyone what this place is supposed to stand for. Respect. Inclusion. Excellence. That's what this restaurant is about. And right now," he let the words hang in the air, his eyes scanning the room, "it's falling short. Jessica swallowed hard. Her throat dry. Carlos shifted uncomfortably. And even Tyler, usually so composed, looked uneasy. This isn't just about me, Jay continued, his voice steady. It's about every person who walks through those doors. They deserve to be treated like they matter. Doesn't matter what they're wearing, how they look, or where they're from. Everyone gets the same respect. Period. Jay's tone softened slightly, though it lost none of its weight. I know mistakes happen. We're all human. But what I saw last time, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And I don't tolerate that kind of behavior in my house. Jessica felt her chest tighten. She wanted to say something, to explain. But no words came. Jay stepped closer to the center of the room, his presence commanding. You've got one chance to get this right. Training starts today. It's not just about going through the motions, it's about changing how you think, how you act, and how you treat people. He paused, letting his words sink in. If you can't handle that, the door's right there. No hard feelings. But I'm not keeping anyone here who doesn't believe in what this place stands for. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Jay's gaze lingered on each face, searching for any sign of defiance or hesitation. Finally, he nodded. Good. Ryan will handle the rest. I'll be back to check in. As he turned to leave, he stopped by Jessica's station. Her breath caught as his eyes locked on hers. Jessica. Right? He asked. His voice calm but pointed. Yes. Sir, she whispered, her hands gripping the menus tightly. You've got potential, Jay said, surprising her. But potential means nothing if you don't use it. Show me you're better than what I saw last time. Jessica nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I will. Jay gave a small nod, then walked toward the door. The staff exhaled collectively as the tension in the room shifted slightly. Outside, the reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed as Jay stepped into the sunlight. Inside, Ryan clapped his hands, snapping the staff back to attention. All right, everyone. Training starts now. This isn't just a job anymore. This is Jay Carter's restaurant. Let's get to work. The atmosphere in the restaurant was different now, not just tense, but purposeful. For the first time, the staff understood that this wasn't about avoiding punishment. It was about rising to a new standard, one that demanded respect and excellence in every interaction. As Jessica watched Ryan begin the training session, she felt a flicker of something unexpected, hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to prove she was more than her mistakes. The first day of training began with an air of quiet apprehension. The dining room, usually bustling with the noise of clinking glasses and casual conversation, now held a group of employees seated around tables, notebooks in front of them. At the head of the room stood Ryan Brooks, clipboard in hand, his expression steely but not unkind. Welcome to day one, Ryan began, his voice calm but firm. Today isn't about finger-pointing or blame. It's about understanding what went wrong and fixing it for good. Jessica sat at one of the tables, her posture stiff, pen poised over her notebook. Her mind raced as she replayed Jay Carter's words from the day before. Show me you're better than what I saw last time. The weight of that statement felt heavier now than it had in the moment. Ryan started the session by breaking down the basics: customer service, professionalism, and the importance of empathy. He spoke with precision, each word landing with purpose. This isn't just a restaurant, he said, his eyes scanning the room. It's an experience. Every interaction you have with a guest, no matter how small, contributes to that experience. And if one interaction is off, it taints everything. Carlos leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. So, what are we supposed to do when customers come in with an attitude? He asked, his tone defensive. Ryan didn't flinch. You rise above it. You're not here to match energy, you're here to set the tone. If someone's having a bad day, Your job is to make it better, not worse. Carlos looked away, muttering something under his breath. But Ryan didn't let it slide. Carlos, Ryan said sharply, do you think Jay Carter built this place so you could argue with customers? Carlos straightened in his seat, shaking his head. No, sir. Good. Then let's leave the excuses behind and focus on how we can be better. Jessica couldn't help but steal a glance at Carlos. His usual cocky demeanor had softened, replaced by something closer to unease. She understood the feeling all too well. The next section of the training focused on empathy. Ryan played a short video showing interactions between staff and guests at a similar restaurant, one where every guest was treated with care, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. This is what we're aiming for, Ryan said as the video ended. It's not about putting on a fake smile. It's about making every guest feel like they matter because they do. The words hit Jessica harder than she expected. She thought back to how she had treated Jay on that first night. She hadn't seen him as a person with a story or feelings, she had judged him based on his hoodie and casual demeanor. The shame of that realization burned in her chest. As the training continued, Tyler chimed in. I get that we're supposed to treat everyone the same. But what about people who don't treat us with respect? Ryan nodded, acknowledging the question. That's a fair point. Respect is a two-way street. But here's the thing, you can't control how others act, you can only control how you respond. And responding with professionalism, even when it's hard, is what sets us apart. The room fell quiet. Jessica scribbled notes, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet put into words. When the session broke for lunch, the staff scattered into smaller groups. Jessica found herself sitting alone, picking at a sandwich she didn't really want. She watched Carlos and Tyler at another table, their conversation hushed but animated. She envied their ease with one another. Even under pressure, her thoughts were interrupted by Ryan, who approached her table and sat down across from her. Jessica, he began, his tone measured. How do you think this morning went? Jessica hesitated. I think it was eye-opening, she admitted. There's a lot I didn't realize before. Ryan nodded. That's a good start. But realization isn't enough. You need to act on it. I know, Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to mess up again. Ryan's expression softened slightly. Nobody expects perfection. What we expect is effort. Jay sees potential in you. Or he wouldn't have said what he did yesterday. Don't let him down. More importantly, don't let yourself down. Jessica blinked back sudden tears and nodded. I won't, she said firmly. The afternoon session was more interactive, with role-playing exercises designed to simulate real-world scenarios. Jessica volunteered for one, playing the role of a server interacting with a difficult customer. Her performance wasn't flawless, but Ryan commended her effort and gave her constructive feedback. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. The tension was still there, but it was no longer oppressive. It had morphed into a collective determination to improve. As the staff cleaned up and prepared for the evening shift, Jessica caught Carlos's eye. You think we'll survive this? She asked, half joking. Carlos smirked. We don't have a choice, do we? Jessica managed a small smile in return. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Back at his home, Jay Carter scrolled through updates from Ryan on his phone. He saw pictures of the staff hard at work, notes from the training sessions, and a brief summary of the day's progress. Jay leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. It wasn't fixed yet, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. Good, he muttered to himself. Keep it going. Tomorrow, he'd visit again, not as a silent observer, but as a leader determined to see his vision realized. For now, he let himself relax, knowing that the first steps toward change had been taken. The morning sun poured through the restaurant's large windows, illuminating the polished tables and gleaming cutlery. For the first time in days, There was a sense of clarity in the air. The staff arrived early, bracing themselves for Jay Carter's next visit. Unlike his previous appearances, this one was expected, and that knowledge brought a mix of nerves and determination. Jessica arrived first, her uniform neat and pressed. She stood at the server station, scanning the neatly arranged menus and mentally rehearsing the principles from yesterday's training. She was determined to prove she deserved to stay. The words Ryan had spoken the day before echoed in her mind: effort matters more than perfection. Carlos walked in soon after, carrying a tray of freshly polished glassware. He gave Jessica a nod, his usual cocky grin replaced with a look of quiet focus. "Ready for round 2? He asked, his voice light but his tone serious. Jessica nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." In the kitchen, Tyler worked with a level of precision that was almost mechanical. His movements were swift and efficient as he prepared for the day's service. He paused only to adjust a tray of herbs, ensuring everything was in perfect order. By mid-morning, Ryan arrived, clipboard in hand and an expression that demanded attention. The staff gathered around him as he outlined the plan for the day. "Mr. Carter will be here shortly," Ryan began, his tone firm but encouraging. "When he walks in, he's not just looking for clean tables and good food. He's looking for respect. Remember, this is your chance to show him that yesterday wasn't just for show." Jessica glanced around the room, noting the somber nods from her colleagues. It was clear everyone understood the stakes. A few minutes later, the sound of the front door opening sent a ripple through the room. Jay Carter stepped inside, dressed sharply in another tailored suit. The sunlight glinted off the gold chain resting against his crisp white shirt. His stride was slow and deliberate, his expression unreadable. The staff greeted him in unison. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." Jay paused, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He nodded slightly, acknowledging their greeting, and then turned to Ryan. "Let's see how we're doing," he said. Ryan led him on a brief tour of the restaurant, pointing out the changes that had already been implemented. The dining area was immaculate, and the kitchen ran like a well-oiled machine. Jay nodded approvingly but said little, his focus on observing every detail. When he returned to the dining room, Jay sat at a table near the center. Jessica, heart pounding, approached him with a menu and a carefully practiced smile. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome back. Can I get you started with some water or perhaps a coffee?" Jay looked up, his expression neutral. "Water's fine," he said. Jessica nodded and walked to the kitchen, her steps measured. She returned moments later with a glass of water, placing it gently on the table. "Are you ready to order? Or would you like a moment?" she asked, maintaining her composure. Jay studied her for a moment before responding. "I'll have the house special," he said. "Let's see how it tastes today." Jessica nodded again, jotting down the order with a level of precision that hadn't been present a week ago. As she walked away, she felt a surge of relief. She hadn't faltered. In the kitchen, Tyler took the order slip with a determined nod. He worked meticulously, double-checking every ingredient and ensuring the presentation was flawless. By the time the plate left his hands, it looked like a piece of art. Jessica delivered the dish to Jay's table, her heart racing as she set it down. "Here you are, sir," she said, stepping back slightly. Jay picked up his fork and took a bite. For a moment, his expression didn't change, and Jessica felt her stomach tighten. Then, he nodded slightly, placing the fork down. "Much better," he said, his tone calm but approving. Jessica exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. As the day went on, Jay continued to observe, quietly taking note of every interaction between the staff and the guests. He saw Carlos move quickly to assist a couple with their coats and noticed how Tyler took extra care in plating every dish. Even small gestures, like Jessica refilling a guest's glass without being asked, didn't escape his attention. When the lunch rush finally ended, Jay stood and addressed the staff. "I'm seeing progress," he began. His voice firm but not harsh. "You're starting to get it. This place isn't just about the food, it's about the people. Every guest who walks through those doors deserves to feel welcome. You're moving in the right direction. But don't let up. Consistency is key." The staff nodded. Their faces a mix of relief and determination. Jay turned to Jessica, who stood near the back of the group. "You've come a long way in a short time," he said. "Keep it up." Jessica felt a wave of pride and nodded. "Thank you, sir. I will." As Jay left the restaurant, the staff exchanged quiet glances. The tension that had hung over them like a storm cloud was beginning to lift, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. In the kitchen, Tyler leaned against the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. "I think we might actually pull this off," he said, a rare smile crossing his face. Carlos smirked. "Don't get too comfortable. He'll be back." Jessica smiled to herself, her confidence growing. For the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. And as Jay walked to his car, he allowed himself a small smile. The change he had envisioned was finally taking root. And he wasn't about to let it stop now. The days that followed Jay Carter's visit marked a pivotal shift for the restaurant and its staff. Training sessions became more intense, drilling down into the smallest details of service, communication, and respect. For the first time, the staff felt not only accountable but also united in a shared goal. Jessica immersed herself in the process, determined to prove that she was more than her past mistakes. Each morning, she arrived early to study the training materials, often lingering after hours to practice her interactions with colleagues. Her pride, once a shield against vulnerability, was now a quiet source of fuel. Carlos, too, seemed changed. The brashness that once defined him had softened into a quiet diligence. He no longer muttered sarcastic remarks during training or rolled his eyes at constructive criticism. Instead, he listened, asked questions, and began taking pride in his work. Even Tyler, who had always been competent but indifferent, seemed inspired. His plates became miniature masterpieces, each one crafted with care and precision. He no longer worked just to clock out but to create something he could be proud of. By the end of the week, the restaurant felt like a different place. The energy in the room had shifted. It was no longer dominated by tension or fear but by a quiet determination to rise to Jay's expectations. But the real test was yet to come. On Saturday evening, the restaurant was booked to capacity. The reservation list included high-profile guests, including a few local celebrities. Jay had made it clear to Ryan that he wouldn't be attending this time. He wanted to see how the team performed without the pressure of his presence. From the moment the first guests arrived, the staff knew the stakes were high. Jessica manned the hostess stand, her posture straight and her voice warm as she greeted each guest. "Good evening," she said, her smile genuine. "Welcome. Let me show you to your table." The dining room buzzed with activity as servers moved swiftly but gracefully between tables, balancing trays of drinks and plates of food. Carlos, now stationed in a section he once joked was cursed because of demanding guests, handled his tables with ease. He chatted with diners, anticipated their needs, and even diffused a minor complaint with a charm that surprised even himself. In the kitchen, Tyler worked with laser focus, calling out orders and coordinating with his team. His voice carried authority but none of the impatience that had once marked his tone. "Let's get that filet mignon up. Perfect plating. Team, this is the big leagues tonight," he said, his energy contagious. The hours flew by, and for the first time in weeks, the staff found themselves not dreading the shift but thriving in it. Every challenge, an unexpected spill, a late reservation, a last-minute menu change, was met with a calm, collective resolve. But the true test came midway through the evening when a couple walked in without a reservation. Jessica recognized the type immediately, well-dressed but clearly impatient. The kind of guests who expected perfection and weren't shy about voicing their dissatisfaction if things didn't go their way. In the past, she might have bristled at their attitude. Tonight, she reminded herself of what she had learned. She stepped forward with a smile. "Good evening," she said warmly. "Welcome to the restaurant. Unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight. But let me see what I can do for you." The man sighed loudly, glancing at his watch. "We don't have all night," he said, his tone sharp. "I completely understand," Jessica replied, her voice calm. "If you'll give me just a moment, I'll see if we can accommodate you." She stepped away to consult the seating chart, her mind racing. There was no table immediately available. But she remembered something Ryan had said during training: think about the experience. How can you make it work without compromising the service? An idea sparked. Jessica approached Carlos, whose section had just cleared a table. "Can you help me out?" she asked, explaining the situation. Carlos nodded without hesitation. "Let's do it." Within minutes, the couple was seated, their irritation melting as Carlos greeted them with his trademark charm. He walked them through the menu, recommended a wine pairing, and ensured their evening started on the right note. Jessica watched from the hostess stand, relief washing over her as she saw the couple begin to relax. By the time the evening wound down, the staff was exhausted but proud. They had navigated the busiest night the restaurant had seen in months without a single major hiccup. As the last guests left, applause broke out among the team. Ryan gathered them in the dining room, his expression one of genuine pride. "Tonight, you showed what this place is capable of," he said. "Jay's not here, but I guarantee he'll hear about this. You've come a long way in a short time, and it shows." Jessica felt a swell of emotion she hadn't expected. She glanced at Carlos and Tyler, who shared a quick grin. As the team cleaned up, Jessica caught Carlos by the bar. "Thanks for helping me with that couple earlier," she said. Carlos shrugged. "Hey, we're in this together, right?" Jessica smiled. For the first time, it felt true. That night, as she walked home, she thought about how far they'd all come. The restaurant wasn't just a job anymore. It was a symbol of growth, respect, and the power of second chances. Jay Carter had given them the opportunity to change, and they were determined not to let him or themselves down. The following morning, the restaurant was quiet, its usual hum replaced by the soft shuffle of staff preparing for another day. But this time, there was an air of calm determination rather than tension. Last night's success had given everyone a renewed sense of purpose. Jessica arrived early, as she had done every day since the training began. She took her place at the service station, checking over the reservation list and mentally reviewing the notes she had taken during the week. Her thoughts drifted back to the couple from the night before, their initial frustration, the way Carlos had smoothed things over, and the smiles on their faces as they left. She hadn't felt proud of her work in a long time, but now, she did. Mid-morning, Jay Carter arrived. He walked in without fanfare, dressed in another sharp suit, his gold chain catching the light as he entered. The staff greeted him warmly, their voices no longer tinged with nervousness but with genuine respect. Jay nodded, acknowledging their greetings, and took a seat at his usual table in the center of the dining room. Jessica approached, her smile confident but sincere. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said. "Welcome back. Can I start you off with some water or coffee?" "Coffee, please," Jay said, his tone even. Jessica returned moments later with a steaming cup, placing it carefully on the table. "Would you like to see the menu? Or shall I tell you about today's specials?" Jay looked at her for a moment, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Go ahead and tell me the specials." She recited them effortlessly, her voice steady and engaging. Jay nodded approvingly and placed his order. As he waited for his food, Jay's sharp eyes scanned the restaurant. He noted the subtle changes in the staff's demeanor, the way they moved with purpose. The way they spoke to customers with warmth and attentiveness. He caught glimpses of Carlos expertly balancing trays and engaging with guests. Tyler in the kitchen orchestrating the meal prep like a conductor with an orchestra. And Jessica refilling glasses and checking on tables with a quiet confidence. The food arrived. Plated to perfection. And Jay took his time savoring it. Every bite was a testament to the progress they had made. Not just in the quality of the food but in the care and attention behind it. When he finished, Jay stood and addressed the staff. They gathered around him. Their expressions a mix of anticipation and pride. "I've been watching y'all all morning," he began. His voice calm but carrying weight. "And let me tell you, I'm impressed. This is the place I envisioned when I bought it. This is what respect looks like." The staff exchanged glances. A ripple of relief and satisfaction passing through the group. But Jay continued. "This isn't the finish line. This is the starting point. What you've done over the past week shows me that you're capable of greatness. Now it's about keeping that momentum going. Day after day. No matter who walks through those doors." Jessica felt a swell of emotion as Jay's words settled over them. She glanced at Carlos and Tyler, who both nodded subtly, their determination mirrored in her own. Jay's gaze landed on her. And he smiled slightly. "Jessica, I told you to show me you're better than what I saw that first night. You've done that and then some." "Thank you, sir," Jessica said, her voice steady but filled with gratitude. Jay nodded and turned to Carlos. "And you, Carlos. I've seen the way you've stepped up. Keep it up." "Will do, sir," Carlos replied, his grin genuine. Finally, Jay addressed Tyler. "And Tyler, man, you've got talent. Don't ever settle for less than your best." "Got it, boss," Tyler said with a rare smile. Jay took a step back, his gaze sweeping over the entire team. "This place isn't just about food. It's about making people feel welcome. No matter who they are. That's your job. Every single day. And if you keep doing what you've done this week, I know this restaurant will be something special." With that, Jay turned to leave. As the door swung shut behind him, the staff erupted into quiet applause. Jessica stood at the hostess station, watching him walk away. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged not just in the restaurant, but in the role she had grown into over the past week. That evening, as the restaurant filled with diners, the staff worked together seamlessly. There were no complaints, no tension, just the steady rhythm of a team that had finally found its stride. As the shift wound down, Jessica found herself standing next to Carlos at the bar. "Think we're finally getting the hang of this?" she asked, her tone light. Carlos smirked. "Guess so. Feels good, doesn't it?" "Yeah," Jessica said, smiling. "It really does." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Tyler leaned against the counter, watching his team clean up. He let out a long breath, a small but genuine smile crossing his face. That night, as Jay sat in his home reviewing the day's updates, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. The restaurant wasn't perfect yet, but it was on its way. And more importantly, the people who worked there were finally beginning to see its potential and their own. For Jay, the journey wasn't just about fixing a restaurant. It was about creating a space that reflected his values and giving people the chance to rise to their best selves. And for Jessica, Carlos, Tyler, and the rest of the staff, it was a lesson in growth, redemption, and the power of second chances. The restaurant had become more than a business. It was a symbol of respect, community, and the change that happens when people are given the chance to believe in something bigger than themselves. The restaurant's journey became more than just a story about food and service, it was a testament to growth, second chances, and the power of respect. Jay Carter's vision had transformed not only a business but the lives of everyone who worked there. Jessica, Carlos, Tyler, and the rest of the team found their potential, proving that with effort and belief, Change was possible. Jay's restaurant became a beacon of hope. A place where everyone was welcome, no matter their background. The staff's determination to embody those values inspired others. Turning the restaurant into more than just a dining experience, it became a movement. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories of transformation and resilience from life stories. Your next favorite tale is just a click away.